So welcome to the Avodas of Parshas Shir in the wonderful Kehillah of Ner Avram in beautiful Sha'ar Chesed Yerushalayim. You got the Nusach right. Okay, so again, in these Parshas, every year I mention how some people get frustrated with the amount of material on the Mishkan. And when it gets to Vayakhel-Pikudei, it gets even more so because a lot of it is summarizing and repeating and talking about how it was put together. But obviously, everything that's written in the Torah is there to teach us. And when you look at the Mefarshim, when you look and you can see, you find treasure troves of instruction for life, which is there. So we're going to look at a pasuk that woke up, so to speak, many of the Mefarshim to try to figure out the unusual terminology in it. And it comes in Perek Lamed Vav in Vayakhel, pasuk Dalet Hey, etc. So it says, "Vayavo kol hachachamim ha'osim eskol melechas hakodesh ishish mimlachto shehem osim." All the wise people who were doing the malacha, the work, the craftsmanship, which was kodesh, each person with their specialty, and they all said to Moshe, "Vayomro Moshe, marbim ha'am lahavim midei ha'avoda lamalacha." The people are bringing too much, more than we need for the malacha asher tziva Hashem lasos, what Hashem commanded. So Vayitzav Moshe Rabbeinu commanded, Vayaviru kol b'machnes. So they, whatever communication system they used, they sent out the message in the machne, lemor, ish ve'isha, al yasu od melacha l'trumas hakodesh, vayikalei ha'am me'avi. So that's also a little bit strange. He doesn't tell them stop bringing. He says, right, don't do any more melacha l'trumas hakodesh, to the donation for the Kodesh, and people stopped. The word Vayikale is like jail, kele, right? Meaning they held back. And then comes the pasuk that seems the most strange. V'hamalacha ha'isa dayom l'chol ha'malacha. The malacha, the work, so to speak, we read it literally, was sufficient for all the work. Lasos zosa, to do it, v'hoser, and more. A very strange pasuk. Okay, so Rashi talks about the idea that the malacha is, even vary, is the meleches hava'ah, the malacha of bringing the materials to the Mishkan. But let's start with the question of the Or Chaim HaKadosh. And he asked the most basic question on this pasuk. Again, the pasuk, v'hamalacha hoisa dayom, the malacha was sufficient, l'chol hamalacha, for all the malacha, lasososa, to do it or to accomplish it, v'hoser, an extra, and even more. So the Chaim HaKadosh asks, him shnei dvarim hevchim. These are two opposites. Im dayom, if there's enough, in a hoser, there's not extra. Im hoser, that's not dayom, right? Is it enough? Or is it more than enough? The pasuk seems to be saying both. He says, you have to find some way to reconcile it. And he says, Lo hayatzorich lomar dayom, el v'hamalacha hoisa hoser. In other words, if you're going to say, not only did they bring enough for what was needed, they brought more than enough. So just say they brought more than enough. Obviously, included in more than enough is enough. Lo zuafso, right? So he says like this, and he says, by the way, the entire pasuk is miutar, seems extra. Shari Amar Lamala, we already had that pasuk before that we started with, pasuk Hey, that they told Moshe Rabbeinu, Marabim ha'am lahavi midei avoda l'mlacha. The people are bringing too much for what we need to do. So we obviously understand that there was extra. Okay, so why does the pasuk have to tell us that it was extra? So the Or Chaim HaKadosh brings something that's very important for Ben Adam Lechavero and for understanding how to interact with people. He says, Ulai, it could be, Shiashmienu HaKosuv Chibas B'nei Yisrael B'nei HaMakom. The pasuk is teaching us how beloved, how precious Am Yisrael are in the eyes of Hashem. Ki letzad she'eviu Yisrael yosim mishur hatzarich, that if people really brought more than was necessary, chosh Hashem lekavod kol ish shetarchu ve'eviu v'nichnas kol amuva beis Hashem meleches hamishkan. Kadosh Baruch Hu felt bad for everybody. Nobody wants to go to the effort and bring their donation that doesn't get used. Everyone wanted to build the Mishkan. So he says that there was actually a nes, and everything was included, even though it was more than was needed. He says that's what it means. Meaning the malacha, those things that Hashem said to build, somehow he speak kol malacha shosu b'nei Yisrael, all the malacha of bringing the b'nei Yisrael did. Hagam even though it was more than needed. Hashem didn't want anybody to feel left out. He didn't want them to feel it was there. So he says, Pirushayu Yosem Yatzorich, he speak hamakabel lekabel Yosem Mishirah. Says that the makabel, meaning the Mishkan, right, Moshe Rabbeinu, they were able to receive more, right, than was needed, and it became part of it. So this is the way he reads the pasuk. V'amalocha sheviu, all that they brought, hoisa dayom, it was exactly enough. Meaning, even though it was more, it came out lo chaser lo yosef. It all went into that beautiful Mishkan. Hagam she yosef k'fi emes. Even though there was a lot of extra, in truth, u'amro v'hoser ki nasa nes v'lohoser. That a miracle was made, and right, there was nothing that was not used. There was nothing that was left over. So what we learn from here, right, is to be very sensitive to a person who's bringing something, to a person who's giving something, and to understand how sensitive that person may be, right, when it comes to something that they're bringing that they think you're going to accept gratefully and want and use, and you turn them down. So we find this in a variety of places. It can be even in something which is told. I saw a story, I believe it was about Rabbi Cheskel Avramsky, when he was still in Russia, and there was a certain boy who was imprisoned by the communists, and suddenly one of his Talmidim came running into the house and said, Rebbe, Moshe went free, they let him go. He said, oh, thank you for such a bizarre, I can't thank you so much. 2 minutes later, another boy came in. Rebbe, Moshe went free from the prison. Really, what do you say? Thank you so much for telling me. And so it was for each boy that came, right? He was delighted. And the people in the house that made nice asked, they said, but you already knew from the first one. He said, but they should also be able to feel that they were Mesameach me. They came to be Mesameach me with that Pesura, right? Yeah, I know already. It's that feeling of drop. I mean, the mice, it's hard to know how to deal with it. I've heard the discussion. If somebody comes to tell you a joke, I don't know if you heard this one, right? And you start, yeah, I heard it already. And there's kind of this, right? Now, again, some people say, okay, but if I listen through, he's going to tell. I won't be able to laugh. You have to know your own kochos, right, to be able to hear the joke like it's fresh and to laugh and to enjoy it in that way. There's a story I liked very much. The old Talmud Rebbe, right? He lived in Beit Vegan. He had a very tiny shul, and he used to say, I'm the biggest Rebbe, because some people judge a Rebbe by the car he drives. He said, I go around in an Egged bus, right? So he used to go in the buses. So when the family was sitting Shiva, he had one daughter and his son-in-law, his grandchildren. So a man came in to tell a story. He says, I want to tell you something your grandfather did. It took me a while to figure it out. He said, I was riding on the bus, and the bus stopped by the Shuk, by Machne Yehuda. A man got on the bus, and he had a big bag with him, and was full of garinim, sunflower seeds. And he said, Mirotze garinim. Who wants sunflower seeds? And your grandfather jumped up and he said, Ani. And he filled up. He said, I'd never seen your grandfather eat sunflower seeds, and I don't think he had teeth at that point. So I couldn't understand what was doing. He said, so I tried to put it together. Let's think back. Why does a person get on the bus with a big bag of sunflower seeds and say, Mirotze garinim? Probably because something happy happened in his life. Maybe there was some kind of simcha. He wanted to celebrate with people. He wanted, and and I know that it could very well be that he'll get on Mirotze garinim, and everybody just kind of looks away, and he's standing there feeling like a fool with his big bag of garinim. That one person who jumps up and takes some enthusiastically already saves the day. He says, it took me a long time to figure it out. Your grandfather figured that out in seconds. right? That's the same idea. And when a person wants to give, to be able to see and respect. There's a beautiful story.
Who is that?
That was the old Talmud Rebbe, Yochanan Twersky. So there's a beautiful story about in Beis Yisrael, the Ger Rebbe, that Shemitah came, and people always try to figure out the eights of what to do with an esrog in Shemitah. So it was known that the Ger Rebbe really preferred, he really wanted an esrog that was grown in an orchard that was totally opened up, hefker, during Shemitah, that anybody could come in. Right? Most orchards, they use what's called osar beis din, right, which is a way of doing it to distribute it in an orderly way. A large part of why they do it, I'm told, is because they said when people come to pick esrogim, they don't know how to pick, they destroy the trees. It causes damage for quite a while afterwards. Yeah. Oh, that's nice. You have on site. I got to remember that for to go to Beit Chilti, tell you Sodot. So there was a boy, a Ger Chassid, I believe he was a Yosem, and his uncle had a small pardes, had some trees, and his uncle decided free for all to take. So he got into his head, maybe I'll find an esrog for the Ger Rebbe. So he goes running around the pardes, looking at the trees, looking at the esrogim. He finds the best one he can find, and he picks it, and he gets ready to take a bus into Yerushalayim when the Ger Rebbe has Kabbalas Kal. So he lines up and he comes in to the Beis Yisrael. That day happened to be some Hasidim brought him esrogim to choose from. And on the table are like Miss Universe esrogim. What they got? A bomba esrog, what you call these beautiful, right? Perfectly yellow, perfectly bumpy, perfectly everything that you would want, symmetrical, all these things. And the boy suddenly felt ashamed of the esrog he brought because it was nice, but it couldn't compare. So he held it behind his back. The Beis Yisrael was very sharp. He said, "What do you have there?" So I said, "It's an esrog from my uncle's pardes. It was hefker. I brought it for the Rebbe. I know it's not so nice." He told the Hasidim, "Take away all the other ones. This is the one I'm going to use." So this is what we're supposed to learn from this Orach Chaim HaKadosh, from this Amalacha Haisa, right? That the Malacha was Dai v'hoser, that it was there to the extent that HaKadosh Baruch Hu made a miracle. And we know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't do miracles like they say, dichdi, stam, for nothing. It's in certain extreme circumstances that HaKadosh Baruch Hu changes the systems that he set up in the world to make this miraculously, so to speak, absorb all the donations. So that's there to teach us how to relate to people in that. I think they say of Moshe Feinstein, when he was very elderly, somebody came to visit him. And after they left, right, he suddenly said, "I have to go down. I have to go after them." And like ran after them, didn't understand. So he came back. He said, "That person had given me once a picture to put on the wall, but we had some painting done. The picture was taken down. So I was afraid that he came and he saw the picture wasn't up. So I wanted to explain to him that we keep it up. Just we took it down just then. You know, these things. He was also makpid. I heard, you know, some yeshivas have a variety of plaques, you know, for this one donated that, and this one in memory of so and so, to make sure that nothing ever blocked one of those. Right? In other words, a person put it up there, so don't put your coat over it. They put it up there to be seen. Right? It's even a question. Some shuls, right? You have the shliach tzibur sitter. Right? That's a sitter that gets a lot of use. Usually, it's a big sitter that sits on the amud that the chazan uses. And it was one shul that it was really getting kind of battered. So somebody brought a new one. But the Rav says, "I don't know, I have to ask the people who gave it." In other words, they gave that to be used. It's still usable. It's true. It's not so beautiful. We can't just sideline it and put in this one when they gave it that way. So it's a lot of food for thought in a lot of different situations. Let's take a look at some more approaches to this. There are many, many, right? This is just a tiny sample. If you look in the Mefarshim, you find so many approaches to this pasuk. The Divrei Yisrael of Mudgetz, he brought a variety on this pasuk. So he brings the question of the Orach Chaim, what does it mean, Dayon v'hoseh, right? It seems to be a contradiction. And also, why does Rashi say that when it says the malacha that they brought was more than enough? Rashi says the malacha means meleches hava'ah, the malacha of bringing the stuff to the Mishkan. He says, why is that malacha? Malacha usually means a type of artisanship, something like that, not just bringing. So he says, but there was a great malacha in the hava. Right? Remember, it was meis kalisha sheyidvenu libo tikchus trumasi. It wasn't what you brought; it was how you brought it, what your kavana was, right? What it was, the desire with which the person brought. So he says, what happened was that even though they stopped bringing, like it said in the previous pasuk, Moshe Rabbeinu sent out the thing, stop bringing. That was physically, but inside they wanted to bring more and more. The ratzon was vahoser, right? It was enough. They did enough to bring it, but they were just filled with this desire that they wished they could bring more. What happened with that extra desire? He says, Nishar bohem le'v'livneim achareim l'dori doros. This became part of our heritage, part of our spiritual DNA, which is a tshuka v'ratzon l'nadev, v'loseis l'tzdaka, l'mitzvah, l'mitom chayraisa v'kedome. To give to Ner Avram, it doesn't use that word exactly, but obviously it's there that Am Yisrael want to give. We are givers. And that, he says, comes from this meleches hava, that put into us not just what to bring, but how to bring and the desire to bring. Another explanation he brings is that the desire and the kedusha of their bringing and the simcha and the enthusiasm and all of that was not just enough, was needed to build the Mishkan, but enabled them to bring bracha into their own houses. Meaning it, so to speak, overflowed from the Mishkan, and that enabled everyone's house to be a place where the Shekhinah could come also, that the Shekhinah would be shor b'maaseh yadeh. Another approach, he says, is meleches hava means was accompanied with tefillah, was accompanied with davening. Okay, and they davened. They were trying to accomplish something very difficult, that the Shekhinah would come and dwell in this physical structure that was being built. And this tefillah was so powerful, right, and so shalem, that even though he brings two approaches, Chazal say tefillah osa mechza. Tefillah accomplishes half. So one can be, they did their half, and then it was left for Moshe Rabbeinu to fill in, because he said the bracha, or he says he saw from the Zedek Shover, right, that it's actually their tefillah, in this case, didn't just do mechz. It was so powerful, it did more than tefillah usually is able to accomplish. Okay, so these are a few of the ideas from the Divrei Yisrael. Now, I saw a fascinating approach brought from Biala Rebbe. Right, this was Rabbi Yaakov Yitzchak Biala from Ramat Aaron in Bnei Brak. So he started with a story. He said that there was a Rebbe called Rabbi Yirmiyah Me Ofala. He lived in Varsha before World War II. A great tzaddik, so it says in the Sefer. On Erev Shabbos Kodesh, he didn't have a big shul, so people were trying to get a minyan who would come to daven mincha. So even when they got 10, he wanted one more person to come. So when somebody asked him, why do we need 11? Right? He says, because it was getting dark already. It was, so why should we wait for this one? So the Rebbe says, Chazal tell us, Kol be'asor shechinta sharia. The Shekhinah dwells when you have a gathering of 10. But he says, I don't want a person to think, the Shekhinah must be here because of me. When there's 11, each person might think, you know what? It might not be because of me. It could be because of the other 10. Meaning this is almost a different approach. This is to bring anova, a certain humility. And therefore, he says, this is what was happening here. The malacha was left over. It was extra, right? So that no person would feel, I made this Mishkan. It's here because of me. Maybe not, right? Maybe have a little humility. Maybe yours wasn't good enough. Maybe it's an interesting approach which is there. Now I'd like to see a medrash which is a fascinating medrash and leads us to a big chiddush in the making of the Mishkan. So the medrash tells us like this. Yeah, the medrash Rabbah. This is in Pikudei, but it's talking about our pasuk. Perek Nun Aleph, right? Beis. So it says, "V'hamalacha hisadayim," that the malacha that was done was sufficient and was left over. Says the medrash. Nichnas Moshe Eitzel B'Tzalel. Moshe came in to B'Tzalel to see how the work is going. He saw that there was leftover. So Moshe Rabbeinu said, "Amar lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ribbono Olam, asinu es melechas HaMishkan v'isarnu." We built the Mishkan, but we have leftover materials. Ma nase benoiser. What should we do with what's left over? Amar lo. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to him, "Lech va'asei bohem Mishkan la'edus." Go and make with these materials a Mishkan for the Edus, meaning for the Torah. Halach Moshe v'asa behem. Moshe went and did that. Kivan shebali tein cheshbon, when he came to report on the cheshbon of how the materials were used, he said, "Kach v'kach yotza Mishkan." This is what was used for the Mishkan itself. Ubeyeser, and with the leftover, asiti Mishkan la'edus. I made a Mishkan for the Torah. Vayakhel-Pikudei ha-Mishkan, Mishkan ha'edus. It says. This is very mysterious. What was made? What is the Mishkan ha'edus?
How does edus come to the Torah?
So edus Hashem ne'amona machkim aspesi. It's one of the code words, so to speak, for Hashem. It testifies, right, to Hashem's choosing Am Yisrael, giving us the Torah. Everything which is in the Torah is an edus. Okay, so the Yismach Yisrael of Alexander brings this medrash, and he brings a parish from the Vorka Rebbe, Rabbi Yitzchak Mivorki. So he says, once again, the entire Kedusha and Chiyus, right, the Mishkan was a living entity. I remember hearing from Yonis and David, if you remember in the Tisha B'Av Gemaras, where it talks about Tito stabbing the paroches and blood coming out of the paroches, and he thought is so it gave Titus this gaiva that, so to speak, he killed Vayakhel. But he said there was also a message for Am Yisrael to show us what we were losing. That the Mishkan, the Mikdash, is something alive. That those barriers, the Mishkan's all made up with barriers, but it was barriers that connected us to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we were losing a living connection there. Okay, so he says all of this came from the Kedusha of the Ratzon of Am Yisrael, that they wanted the Shekhinah to be able to be in the Mishkan, to be among them, which is a very difficult thing to do. How could it be done? Alshich says, because of the key words in Shir HaShirim, Tocho Ratzuf Ahava. It was paved with love, with Ava. So from the Ava and Yira and Ratzon and Cheshek, from all this Ava and Yira and the desire that they had, when they brought things to the Mishkan, they were able to bring things, right, to bring the Shekhinah to actually exist in a physical entity, the Mishkan. When there was left over, so he says that means there was Ratzon that was left over, right? As we said before, they had all this desire that all these things should be there. So this is what Moshe Rabbeinu asked, not so much what should we do with the materials, what should we do with the Ratzon that came with these materials, with this desire, right? And he says, what you do is asay bohem. The way Rabbi Yitzchak Mivorki read it is, make in them, make in Am Yisrael, b'pnimius lev Yisrael, a mishkan la'edus. Kind of similar to one of the approaches we said from the Divrei Yisrael, meaning that can be used to make in them a mishkan, like the famous song, Bilvavi Mishkan Evne, right? That we can build, and we're supposed to build a mishkan inside of ourselves. That was what the Rabbi Yitzchak Mivorki said. Now, here the Alexander Rebbe expands on it. He says we have to realize also that one of the things going on in the Mishkan was tikkun for the Chet HaEgel. Okay, in other words, this was a way to repair the damage that was done with the Chet HaEgel. And what people brought was a tshuva process. This was a way that they channeled their tshuva by giving now to what you're supposed to give, to Kedusha, instead of for the Egel. And it says, V'hoiser, meaning that their desire of tshuva was more than was needed to be mechaper for the chet. Okay, but Am Yisrael were very humble, right? When they saw that some was left over, so each person started thinking, maybe I didn't do tshuva properly. Maybe some of that was mine, and I didn't do tshuva properly. And then their hearts were even broken, and they did tshuva even more powerfully. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu saw that, he said, take that extra level of tshuva that they have, that extra hakna, that extra humility, and make that asay bohem with that. Once again, like Rabbi Yitzchak Uvargi said, in their hearts, Mishkan La'edus, because Eina Shechina Shara, right? The Shechina is only in a place where a person is humble. One of the visions of Rebbe's, I think it was the Imrei Chaim, said he liked going to the Kosel because it says, La'olam lo zavzo Shechina mikosel ha'ma'aravi. The Shechina never left from the Kosel ha'ma'aravi. And it says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says about a person who has gaiva, who's arrogant, Ein ani v'hu yicholim ladu b'makom echad. We can't be in the same place. So the Shekhinah is not leaving. That means I have to become humble. He said, so that's why going to the coastal. He said, makes me humble. But here is, we'll finish with this bomb that is fascinating. And it's brought here in the Perush. He says, and actually, there was something physical that was made. Me'anoisa, it was made an oil miyuchad betoch kodesh hakadoshim la'edos. An extra oil, an extra construction was made for the Aron Kodesh. He said, this is brought in the Mefarshim, right? And I looked it up here. The Eitz Yosef brings from the Yefei Torah. He says, in the Kodesh Kodashim, where the Aron Kodesh was, Moshe Rabbeinu took what was left over and he made an oil miyuchad, a special oil, kamin mishkan, like a mini mishkan, to put the Aron into. He says, and this was hinted to in the pasuk when it says, Vayaveyas ha'aron el hamishkan. The Aron was put into the Mishkan. He says that means a Mishkan katan miyuchad asli la'aron. So this to me was mind-blowing. There was no tzivui, there was no commandment to construct such a keli in the Mishkan. There was no such tzivui. But here, that giving, that extra was so powerful that HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe Rabbeinu to build something else from that. It should be used. Correct. And yeah, you would think it's about Tosif or something. I don't know. Right? Like I say, it was a little bomb going off in my head that requires thinking. Right? But it's just an idea that's so beautiful that something was created to even do more. What we learn from this is that no good desire goes without result. Everything that a person desires truly and wants and tries brings results, changes the world, is treasured by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So we have to learn to recognize that and treasure that in other people and to know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu treasures that in ourselves as well. Have a wonderful week.